thundery, and that theme continues on Thursday and Friday, with temperatures close to average around 21 to 22 degrees.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win your mortgage or rent paid for a whole year. That's a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to a whopping £20,000. Plus, we'll add an extra £5,000 on top for good measure. Make sure you don't miss out as lines close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Nigel Farage announces a reform government would replace the Human Rights Act and membership of the ECHR with a British Bill of Rights to ensure citizens rank higher in rights than foreign arrivals. A noble ambition, but reform needs to ensure it would work and go with the grain of our constitution. The proposals in their current form are simply a hangover from the EU. Also tonight, the Prime Minister was once the champion of legal bureaucracy. Now his Home Secretary vows to clip judges' wings with a fast-track asylum plan. It would cut the backlog by letting everybody in, boosting Britain's pull factor for illegal migrants. When will the government get a grip? And what do former MPs get up to after their tenure in the House of Commons comes to an end? Some enter the Lords, some become lobbyists, and some get their own reality TV shows. I'll be speaking to former Deputy Prime Minister Baroness Coffey about what she's been up to since leaving the Commons. Also tonight, across Britain, the Union flag and St George's Cross are being raised high on buildings, lampposts and streets. But is this wave of patriotism a symbol of national pride or a sign that Britain, its people and our way of life are under threat? State of the Nation starts now. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Bowen.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. The headlines at 8 o'clock. 3 people have died and a 4th remains in hospital in a serious condition following a helicopter that crashed during a flying lesson on the Isle of Wight. The aircraft came down near Shanklin Road just after 9:20 this morning, closing the route as fire, police and ambulance teams rushed in. Witnesses described it spiralling before impact. Northumbria Helicopters said that the aircraft departed from Sandown Airport at approximately 9 a.m. and was undertaking a flying lesson. Hampshire Police say they are continuing to work alongside the Air Accident Investigation Branch to establish what happened. US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that bans flag burning, with those who desecrate the American flag potentially facing 1 year in jail. The president said that the military is ready to go anywhere on short notice to crack down on crime. That's as he signed another executive order aimed at ending cashless bail for suspects arrested in Washington, D.C. In other international news, President Trump said he wants the war in Ukraine to end and that he has spoken to Vladimir Putin. He added that he hasn't discussed specific security guarantees with Ukraine, but that the US will back up the country. And sticking with the US, President Trump says he would like to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this year. His comments come as he's currently hosting the South Korean president at the White House. During the meeting, he said that his administration will undertake a joint venture with South Korea and Japan related to oil in Alaska. Back at home, the government is promising a fast-track asylum appeals system as the Prime Minister faces growing pressure over migrant hotels and record small boat crossings. A new poll released today shows 71% of voters think Sir Keir Starmer is failing to get a grip of the issue. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says delays of more than a year to hear appeals are completely unacceptable, with 51,000 cases now clogging the system. The fast-track plan would see appeals handled by panels of independent adjudicators instead of judges, aiming to speed up removals of people with no right to stay. Labour insists the reforms will be swift, fair and independent, but critics warn that nearly half of asylum appeals succeed. Protests at asylum hotels continued over the bank holiday weekend. That's as fresh footage of migrants on Gravelines Beach in northern France has been recorded earlier today. Foreign Secretary David Lammy says he is horrified as at least 20 people, including 5 journalists, have reportedly been killed in an Israeli strike on Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza. Officials say 2 separate strikes hit the site, the second as rescuers tried to reach the wounded. The Israeli military confirmed a strike in the area, saying it regrets any harm to uninvolved individuals and does not target journalists. President Trump said he was not happy with the strikes, while the Foreign Secretary added, "We need an immediate ceasefire." The US President added he is making a very serious diplomatic push on the situation in Gaza. And Europe's biggest street party is in full swing as Notting Hill Carnival lights up West London. Today's events included the iconic Adults Parade, the highlight of the 3-mile procession. Police say they were braced for trouble after 61 officers were assaulted at last year's event. 140 arrests were made yesterday alone. This year, 7,000 officers are on duty with stop and search powers and live facial recognition cameras in use. Those are the latest GB News headlines, so let's go back to Jacob in Somerset.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Welcome back to State of the Nation live from Somerset. Reform has announced that it would introduce a British Bill of Rights to replace the Human Rights Act to ensure British citizens are given legal priority over foreigners. It's absolutely right that British citizens should take priority over people who aren't from this country, particularly those who arrive illegally. Nigel Farage is right to want to repeal the Human Rights Act and ensure Britons are put first, though the constitutional logistics of introducing a British Bill of Rights make this proposal a complex one, because a Bill of Rights goes against the grain of our uncodified constitution of our parliamentary democracy, because of the principle that Parliament can't bind its successors, which is what a Bill of Rights tries to do. Now, as you all know, we have a Bill of Rights from 1689, but it is amendable and has been amended, both directly but also crucially via implied repeal. Bear in mind the Bill of Rights gives us the right to bear arms for the maintenance of a Protestant militia, something that has been implicitly repealed in the centuries since. The United Kingdom never had any concept of constitutional statutes until we joined the European Union, and then the courts invented this concept to protect the European Communities Act 1972 from implicit repeal. So what we need is a restoration of our uncodified constitution, which a British Bill of Rights wouldn't particularly help with. It would just be retaining essentially an idea outside the common law that comes from our EU membership. However, the principle that's being enunciated is fundamentally reasonable, that British citizens should have higher rights than non-citizens under the ordinary law in this country. For example, it would be reasonable to suspend habeas corpus for people we are about to deport. Also, the right to family life should be applied differently to illegal arrivals or people who've committed crimes, and just because they're children like chicken nuggets, it's not unreasonable to say they shouldn't be forced to leave. Mind you, I'm not sure other children like chicken nuggets that much. It's also not unreasonable to say you can only use the NHS if you're a British subject, and surely only British citizens should get access to child benefit, whilst it's absolutely crazy that the NHS bursary scheme is open to asylum seekers, a fact we discovered earlier on today. It sometimes seems as if the civil service publishes these measures hoping nobody reads the publications that they're in. The famous Sir Humphrey Appleby would be proud. So although I don't think a Bill of Rights is the right answer, it is surely time to prioritise our own people and put their interests first. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. And now I'm really absolutely delighted to invite a special guest, the former Conservative MP and Deputy Prime Minister, Baroness Coffey. Tiz, if I may.
Please.
Thank you very much for coming in. This is a really interesting idea because when we were both in government, both with Boris and then when you carried on in government with Rishi Sunak, there was an aim to introduce a British Bill of Rights, but it didn't work, it didn't come to fruition. Why was that, and do you think it would be a good idea and a good replacement for the Human Rights Act?
Well, Dominic Raab, when he was Lord Chancellor, actually put a bill into Parliament back in June 2022. And I guess the situation that then happened was the change of premiership away from Boris. And so some of that lost, I think, a lot of impetus. Also at the time, I think then the Home Secretary felt that other measures could be done and we didn't need to go down this constitutional challenge, as you've just mentioned. But I've got no doubt that what the government is doing right now by repealing quite a lot of the immigration law that we put in place when we were in government is absolutely the wrong direction, has led to the increases of people trying to come to this country because they know that they have a higher chance of, once they're here, of staying here. So there may be opportunities, I think, to do relinquishing, but a lot of these things is establishing case law now, and we need to kind of wipe the slate clean.
But the difficulty we faced is we passed some fairly robust statute law, which the courts then interpreted in accordance with the Human Rights Act, which the Human Rights Act allows them to do, and said that actually the decisions we'd made were outside convention rights for people. And so every time we tried something, we came up against a brick wall. And I wonder whether anyone is going to be able to solve this problem whilst they're inside the European Convention.
Well, the Convention may be one thing. I think there's certainly clear bits of the Human Rights Act that need to be repealed, set aside, whichever way that is done. I don't know if Dominic's proposals at the time went far enough because it still had aspects of Convention rights in there. But a lot of these things, I think, Frankly, if we had managed to get a grip, and if this government had actually, instead of getting rid of some of the deterrents, actually maintained them, we might not be in the difficulty we're in today.
Yes, I mean, I had some personal loyalty to Dominic's bill because I actually worked on it in a small subcommittee with Ursula Braverman and the very brilliant Lord Wolfson. The problem was we were trying to create the rights within the framework of the European Convention, which didn't ultimately work because they overrode what you were putting into the British Bill of Rights. It's a question of how constitutionally fundamental do you need to be. And I just wonder whether we've left the European Union but we haven't actually taken on board the constitutional consequences of that and are still to some extent operating as if we're plugged into their systems and their different type of law.
Well, Jacob, I remember doing the morning media round the morning that the planes were basically been stopped all those years ago. And of course, it had nothing to do formally with the European Union. It was the European Court of Human Rights, as you point out, which is a Council of Europe rather than membership of the EU. I mean, I do recall during the referendum some time ago, even Theresa May said she'd rather leave the ECHR than she would leave the European Union at the time. So it has been a source of frustration for some time. So what's going to be the tipping point? Well, I know the Conservative Party have got their review that I'm sure we'll be reporting very soon. Nigel Farage is getting on with these, and there's already amendments being tabled to a variety of bills through proposals from the Conservatives' deportation bill. The challenge at the moment, I think, will be getting any of that through Parliament anyway. So, unfortunately, I think this will remain until the chance that people have the opportunity to vote in the next general election. But I think by then, Conservatives and who are accusing Nigel Farage of copying a lot of what they have put forward. But nevertheless, I think we're reaching that tipping point for sure.
And you mentioned there aren't votes in Parliament to do the radical things at the moment. There weren't when we were in office, were there, that quite a large number of Tory MPs were pretty squeamish about leaving the European Convention or overriding it in domestic law?
Well, I think there's an element of where if it hasn't been in the manifesto, then people can, by and large, argue, including the Lords, but internally people can say, well, this isn't what I stood for, and you can't force this on me now. So I do think it's likely that we'll see from at least two parties a very clear way forward. And of course, still being a Conservative person in the House of Lords, I'm hopeful that people will recognise that the Conservatives are more likely to be able to get this done.
Yes, except we didn't last time. Excuse me. And that's the criticism of the Conservative Party, is that we've said all this before. How do we get over that? Or do you think now we see that Donald Trump has managed to do it in America, that it changes the political dynamic?
Well, I think the clear thing is about how quickly we can turn around the different legal aspects. And I'm not absolutely clear that we were so resolute in our 2019 manifesto that we would leave the ECHR at the time. At the time, it was get Brexit done. And we did. Helped by your good self as well, with your particular role in trying to deregulate. But in terms of what we see in other parts of the world, Australia has specifically taken action on the high seas. We've seen not only the wall from Donald Trump, but also how they've taken the approach to deportation. But undoubtedly, our own case law that we've had, judgments that have been made, have made that difficult. That's why primary legislation and wiping that slate clean is going to be absolutely critical. So we can't keep going back to conventions of the past or even judgments made.
And that some other European countries, Denmark and Sweden, are managing to reduce the number of asylum seekers by taking some quite firm action and doing things that are within the convention, like making it very, very difficult ever to become a Danish or a Swedish citizen.
Well, indeed, and perhaps things like the indefinite leave to remain, how long we should be translating that in terms of also no recourse to public funds, what should that mean? Because I'm conscious that there are a number of people who have since got British citizenship after being here for so many years, are now claiming benefits, and that's not what it was designed for. So I think there's an opportunity for a reset, which Labour may well take up some of that, but less likely, I think.
Do you have any sympathy for this government? Because when you were a minister, you were often in the courts, and actions were being brought, particularly at DWP, against decisions you wanted to make. And when Labour was in opposition, they thought, ha, that's very funny, the minister's been embarrassed. And now they're finding the same legal system is tripping them up. And actually, we need, and this is my point of constitutional restoration, we need to get back to a situation where ministers accountable to Parliament make decisions, rather than judges replacing their judgment for that of ministers.
Well, initially I had some sympathy because they'd been out of government for some time, although they brought back some experienced ministers. They had that usual, dare I say it, perhaps not the greatest of humility, having won such a big a majority. But I think they still seem to forget that they only got a third of the popular vote right across the country. So I'm afraid I have little sympathy nowadays for ministers who continue to put out legislation, which, in my own experience in the House of Lords, I've seen in more recent times that quite significant pieces of legislation don't even get talked about in the Commons. And when you try and scrutinise them in the Lords, there's often a lot of resentment almost that we're doing that deep level of scrutiny and things are still coming out of the woodwork. So from a certain perspective, any new government deserves a little bit of sympathy in terms of how they get to grips. But at the moment, I don't think they're showing any modesty, I think is the best way of putting it, and perhaps a bit of humility in making sure that they get stuff right instead of just feels like all the time still being a communication as opposed to detailed legislation, and I'm afraid my sympathy has waned.
Well, we're going to be able to talk about that a bit more in a moment, about the House of Lords. Your godson's going to be reading a mail Mogg towards the end of the programme. So for the moment, Baroness Coffey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, in a moment, the Prime Minister was once the champion of legal bureaucracy, but now his Home Secretary vows to clip the judges' wings with a fast-track asylum plan. He'll cut the backlog by letting everybody in. That's a simple solution, boosting Britain's pull factor for illegal migrants. When will this government get a grip? And this week, the mail Moggs will be read, as I've just mentioned, by Baroness Coffey's godson, but also Sixtus, who's going to be with us in a moment, the one and only Sixtus.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, this Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Thank you, Sam. Now from one Iceman to another, because British ultramarathon swimmer Ross Edgley is currently undertaking an astonishing 1,000-mile swim around Iceland after being inspired by the Thor character and the actor Chris Hemsworth. Well, this challenge, described as the Great Icelandic Swim, is expected to take about 3 months. And it's seen Ross swim already for 6 hours and then rest for 6 hours in a continuous cycle of torture. Now, along the way, he has faced challenging conditions, including rough waters, killer whales and freezing temperatures. I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by the Iceman, the British Thor, Ross Edgley, live from Iceland. Ross, it's an absolute delight to have you, and I'm just delighted to get a connection to Iceland. Sometimes we struggle to get people here in London. Listen, mate, you sound like an absolute man-mountain. What on earth drove you towards this epic challenge?
Oh, thanks, Martin. Yeah, it was, like I said, I was joking with Chris because I just love Icelandic folklore, the sagas, mythology. And we just said, look, swimming around Iceland, it'd be the closest thing to Asgard that you could possibly do. So it was kind of, it started as a semi-joke. And then 3 months later, here we are, 800 miles in, lost parts of my tongue, a lot of chafing around my shoulders and stuff. But we were still going, 200 miles left, home straight is in sight.
So we're doing it for charity? What's behind it?
It's exactly that, Martin. Yeah, so all the way we're going around, we're working with scientists to collect eDNA samples, so they're environmental DNA samples. So it just means that anything in the water, whether it's a minke whale, an orca, a Ross Edgley, anything, it leaves behind a sample. And so by collecting all of these samples, what we're going to be left with is this incredible map of biodiversity around Iceland in a level of detail we've never seen before. So what's amazing, scientists said, look, if someone is crazy enough to try and swim around it, this could be really valuable for us.
GB News.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about the British Bill of Rights, and the mail Moggs have come in, and I've got a special assistant to read them out in the form of Sixtus. Sixtus, over to you. Do you want to read them out?
Mike says, pure restoration is what is required. Restore the sovereignty of Parliament and the supremacy of common law. Belinda says, we've had a referenda on key issues such as joining the EU in 1972 and Brexit. Isn't it time we had a referendum on immigration policy?
Well, that's a really great question from Belinda. I wonder if Sixtus will be old enough to vote in the next referendum when it comes on. But now I'm glad to say that we're going to be moving on to Sir Keir Starmer's view on the judges, because it's no secret that the Prime Minister has a long-standing propensity for increased legal bureaucracy. As a former Director of Public Prosecutions, he has always taken the knee to the judges over the voters. But since pledging to smash the gangs, it seems the Reverend Starmer has found his fellow legal minds to be more of a hindrance than a help. So today, the Home Secretary has pledged to curb the powers of judges in a fast-track asylums appeals plan, being billed as a fix for bogus judges and huge backlogs. But what does this really mean? In 2004, the Asylum and Immigration Act turned asylum adjudicators into judges, a bogus title change that does not elevate the authority of an asylum appeal administrator to a judge. It just lowers the criteria for becoming one. This move will effectively reverse the change of 2004, but it won't actually tackle the backlog. The backlog is going to be tackled by letting people in. That's what speeding it up means, and that will increase the pull factor, because if people think it's easier to get in, then of course they'll try harder. Well, I'm now joined by the human rights lawyer and friend of the programme, Shoaib Khan. Thank you so much for joining me. It seems to me this is a really odd thing for Labour to be doing, because in 2004 they decided that immigration appeals should be heard by people they wanted to call judges rather than adjudicators. Now they're changing it back again. But it's sound and fury that signifieth nothing, surely.
Yes, I mean, I think you're right. But I think that's nothing new, is it? I mean, whether for this government or previous governments. I mean, the point is, every time there's a crisis in the country, anything's happening, people are, particularly enthused about something. The government needs to show as if it's doing something, pretend to be doing something. And I think this is it. I mean, I think even in terms of the plans and proposals, we've not really seen what difference they even claim is going to make, other than changing the title. I mean, and I'm really glad that you brought up this point, because so many others obviously, ignored this or weren't aware of this, that in fact, these same people who hear these appeals were in fact originally adjudicators. So we just changed the title, and now somehow we're bringing it back and we think, oh, that's going to, resolve all the problems. So no, I'm not really sure, even what they're trying to do here.
Well, the only thing I think they could be trying to do is a question of PR, that when you call people judges, people think of grand, bewigged figures with great authority, and that actually the number of adjudications that's done is so large that not all of them are in that category. And so when you get some of these silly cases that get a lot of bad publicity for the migration question, if it's done by a judge, that sounds quite important. If it's done by an adjudicator, it just sounds like a little mistake. And I wonder if it's just the PR of it that matters.
I mean, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure it is just the PR, but I'm not sure, the reason that you say is probably the reason. I mean, well, I really hope it's not something like that. But the point is, I mean, I think just generally, just taking a step back and looking at what they're doing and why they're trying to do it, considering everything that's been happening, the protests, the hotel, the injunction from the High Court last week, all of those things. And after all that, the lesson that the government seems to have learned is, It's the judges that need to be, reined in. It's the judges' fault. Let's blame the courts. Let's blame the judges. And I just don't understand, how any of that is supposed to help. If anything, for instance, they've said now, we read in some of the reports, that they're potentially saying it might be a panel of adjudicators. So right now we have a single judge who hears most in the first-tier tribunal cases, and now it's going to be a panel. So in fact, we're going to need twice the number or thrice the number or 4 times the number of judges/adjudicators to hear those same cases. So I'm really not sure. Now we know how to tackle the backlog. So firstly, obviously we're not talking about initial asylum decisions. We're talking about people who are refused asylum, then they appeal further. This is the review step. So if the Home Office and, between 50 to 60% of such cases every year are allowed, which basically means in more than half of the cases, the Home Office got the decision wrong. They refused where they should have granted. And I think that's the first thing. Why don't we train Home Office caseworkers better, recruit more Home Office caseworkers, just generally improve the Home Office caseworking system so we don't get so many decisions wrong. So that's where we need to start.
But one of the things I'm worried about in terms of trying to speed up the process is that the easiest way to speed up the process is simply to grant asylum. And in another part of government, in PIP applications, there's been an actual financial incentive to the people approving PIP to approve them, and the numbers have got out of control. And that a government needs to reduce numbers will find that it won't succeed in doing that if it speeds up the process. That will simply allow more requests for asylum and appeals for asylum to go through.
Yes, I think so. Some of the other suggestions that we see, obviously, I don't think we've seen any detailed plan from the government. We know that, they panicked and just brought out whatever they had because of what was happening around the country. But one of the things we heard was that they would prioritize cases for people who were in public-funded accommodation, essentially hotels, HMOs, and so on. So basically what that means, just to understand the system right now, we have a certain, percentage of asylum seekers who can afford to rent privately. They just go rent privately, find a house. They're not a burden on the state. Others who are homeless can't afford it. Obviously, they're accommodated in hotels. Now, but by bringing this system in, that we would prioritize people in hotels, everyone would say they're homeless. Everyone would want to get into a hotel. And in fact, what we're doing is we're actually filling up the hotels, filling up HMOs when already there's a shortage. So obviously, it's not a well thought out plan at all.
Well, thank you very much, Shoaib. It's good of you to join us again. I'm afraid I don't think they've got any plan. I think they are all at sea. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll be coming back shortly after a few messages from our sponsors, and we'll be talking about what former MPs get up to after their tenure in the House of Commons comes to an end. Some enter the Lords, some become lobbyists, and some get their own reality TV shows. I'll be speaking with former Deputy Prime Minister Baroness Coffey about what she's been up to since leaving the Commons. See you shortly.
Good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, we have spells of rain moving through overnight, followed by showers on Tuesday, but it's still going to be feeling warm in the southeast. Now, taking a look at the bigger picture, this area of high pressure slips away and is replaced by this area of low pressure, bringing frontal systems through this evening. So we have a band of rain across Northern Ireland. That's going to push in from the west and continue to push eastwards across Scotland, into Northern England, into Wales and the southwest, where it could turn heavy for a time. Dry still across the southeast, but otherwise still rather mild overnight temperatures around 16 or 17 degrees. So as we start Tuesday morning, it's a more unsettled start out there compared to Monday. We've got spells of rain across eastern Scotland, could be heavy for a time. Still across Shetland, holding on to that low cloud, but brighter in the west. Across Northern Ireland, a case of sunny spells first thing and a few showers, similar across Wales and the southwest of England. But across the Midlands and southwards, that's where we hold on to a lot of cloud and this outbreaks of rain. Now, this cloud and rain will continue to push its way eastwards through the morning. It generally starts easing and fragmenting, so not bringing too much in terms of rainfall across the southeast. In fact, it'll actually turn much brighter into the afternoon with warm, sunny spells, but elsewhere it's a case of sunny spells and showers, mainly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. Feeling fresher here, temperatures around average, but in the southeast, highs of 26. Now, as we start Wednesday morning, a cooler start, but unsettled across Northern Ireland once again, with a band of rain clipping into western Scotland, into northern England, into Wales and the southwest of England. Could be heavy and thundery, and that theme continues on Thursday and Friday, with temperatures close to average, around 21 to 22 degrees.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's always a subject of interest for those of political mind. What do former MPs get up to after they leave the House of Commons? Many get elevated to the House of Lords to continue their parliamentary vacation as scrutineers. Many head off to make a living in lobbying. Some simply retire into the abyss and enjoy life out of the limelight. Some, however, do this.
When it gets really hot, Daddy does not wear shorts and a t-shirt. I don't think I've ever seen that, ever. I don't think anyone's ever seen that.
I might have dug out my white suit like the man from Del Monte.
His lovely white suit probably doesn't come out often enough.
Well, I thought I'd be better dressed for you tonight and have proper clothes on rather than a white suit, even though it's been quite warm, as always, in Somerset. But tonight's guest of honour served as the Member of Parliament for Suffolk Coastal from 2010 to 2024 and held many government and cabinet posts in that time, including as Britain's first Lady Deputy Prime Minister. So I have with me today the one and only Baroness Coffey, who, among other things, is a visitor here and has been roped into being on my television channel and is godmother to Alfred. Tiz, thank you for coming down. What changes do you find in life? You're on holiday, which for a minister is unusual.
Well, it is lovely to be on holiday. Lovely to see godson Alfred playing cricket. And I think the big changes, although I'm back serving as a politician, it's a different pace and it's a different vibe of life. And you will know this from your experience as well, Jacob. The never-ending element of being a minister is just always there. And I did over 9 years continuously. So one of the things that I realised, actually, having lost last year, particular thing happened very sadly. Unfortunately, my mother passed away quite quickly. But I then realised quite how tired I was. And it was an opportunity to reflect, to refresh. And then we had a leadership contest, which for us was quite unusual not to be directly involved in. But I've been very fortunate to be appointed back to the House of Lords. So it's able to bring some experience, but really a change in terms of not having to think about what latest event I'm going to at the weekend or all those other elements, and still enjoy helping people where I can, but clearly the focus now is on the detailed legislation and not the day-to-day of trying to help run the country.
And how different do you find the House of Lords, that it's a different pace of life? You've got bishops there. No, not what we think of as bishops, but they think of themselves as bishops. How do you find that?
Well, it is different, and I'm very conscious, and I think the House of Lords is genuinely conscious that the elected House has to ultimately have its way. I do remember a fellow peer, thinking of the cricket that we were watching today, saying it's a bit like being in the third 11. You'll always get to run out, you'll always have a chance to say something, but you might not be noticed quite so much, and that's not a bad thing. The key thing, which I am enjoying, is getting into the nuts and bolts of legislation. And earlier, Jacob, you were mentioning about the number of legal cases that I was involved in as a minister. And that attention to detail and being prepared and going through some of the legislation committees that you chaired is actually been exceptionally helpful for my service now in the Lords, of getting into that nuts and bolts of how things work in terms of legislation, but also that experience. But by and large, it's a much more pleasant vibe in a way. People aren't competing to do a social clip, and there's that wide range of expertise as well, which doesn't actually get voiced that often, but when people have it, then it really gets listened to very much.
But you never had any difficulty with cross-party friendships in the House of Commons. You've always been very good at getting on with people from different parties.
Yeah.
That's even truer in the House of Lords, isn't it? It's much less tribal in that sense.
It's far less tribal, and it's the way it's almost composed. Crossbenchers form about a quarter of the House. But for example, recently I supported a Liberal Democrat amendment and persuaded my party. But what also helped was that we got Jock Stirrup also in favour of this particular measure. It was about the armed forces.
And he's former commander of the armed forces.
That's right.
Crossbench peer.
Crossbench peer. So one of the key differences, I think, has been really understanding how that crossbench element works, but being prepared to still have scrutiny of the government as a whole, but recognising actually collectively we've got a different sort of role that we would do in almost the Arbu cauldron at the other end.
But are you to some extent poacher turned gamekeeper, or vice versa, gamekeeper turned poacher? Because in office, the House of Lords can be a real bother, a horsefly to government, and a lot of time is spent on how do you get this through the House of Lords. Do you now feel slightly guilty making a nuisance of yourself on the new government's programme?
Well, I'd like to think that I'm not trying to undermine the government in achieving their core aims, but I think it's fair to say that when there is some legislation, I think it's our duty to stand up and challenge, and to get into that, especially when so much legislation is now doing even more than ever before what's called Henry VIII powers, giving powers effectively to ministers to write regulations that change all sorts of legislation. I don't think that's the right approach, and that seems to have accelerated in this government. But I think it's fair to say it's something where you're not even allowed to vote in a general election ever again is a big change. But I think it's a good opportunity to at least try and get the elected House to think again every now and again.
And you're still taking the Conservative whip, you're a Conservative politician. Do you look at party politics in a different way, and how do you think we're doing at the moment?
Well, I think the whip certainly works somewhat differently in the House of Lords. It's almost it's almost nice of you to turn up to make sure that you vote with how the Conservative front bench would like you to do so. So I think as a whole, we are absolutely punching above our weight in regards of how we're trying to hold the government to account. I mean, more widely, we're not blind or deaf to the challenges that are facing our leader. Kemi's always said that it will take time before people would even really consider us again. And we've got this situation now where I think there's still an ongoing reaction that we've changed the government, but nothing seems to be working. In fact, it's getting worse. So understandably, looking elsewhere is something which people are working are doing in terms of the polls. But I think it's still not exactly early days, but I think we're still on that journey, and we need to make sure that we bring more people back on side with credible policy, and I think we'll see a lot more of that in the run-up to conference.
And also personality, because charisma is so important in politics, and Kemi's definitely got charisma, but what would you be advising her to do? How would you advise her to present herself? Because the Telegraph had a big piece today complaining about her saying she'd told tales on somebody at school. Are these things just the flotsam and jetsam of interviews that come, or should we see more of the real Kemi?
Well, what I like is when Kemi's doing those slightly longer interviews. Charles Moore did a good one recently at Policy Exchange. But ultimately, in our world today, you have to be able to get that communication across in about 15 to 20 seconds. So what I hope that we will continue to see more of from Kemi is that key communication, getting that cut through. But there's also a wonderful opportunity. Of course, October the 13th, just the week after party conference, will be the centenary of the birth of the great Margaret Thatcher. And I can honestly say I can see many parts in terms of that scientific engineering approach of trying to get stuff done, but undoubtedly adjusting to the politics of today and the communication today is still an ongoing journey, and I think that's true for most politicians.
And the difference is that Margaret Thatcher didn't have Reform outflanking her on the right. And extraordinarily, the combined latest opinion poll vote share of the two main parties, historically, is 35%, whereas in 1979, it was 90%. And that's quite a change in our political system. It's quite hard for us to deal with that because we've been used to being one of the main parties for 300 years. I mean, I was probably there at the beginning, but...
And it's only changed in just those last few years. So we both served at different points during the COVID time, and I think I was explaining to you earlier, I'm still going through preparing my statement for parts of that. But around the world, very few governments really managed to get over that hurdle. Very few were re-elected after that time. So it is that, how do we get that almost without just not a knee-jerk response, but how we communicate and get our policies right. But ultimately, communication comes second. I think the policies is what we need to make sure that we're confident of. And we've got time, I think, and we'll see a lot more in the run-up to conference. Then we can get into how we get that message across once we're confident about what we're saying.
Tiz, thank you very much. I feel slightly guilty. You come as a guest to visit us in Somerset and you get roped into appearing on GB News. It's so you have to sing for your supper, literally. Her godson's going to be doing the Mail Moggs in a moment, but after that we're going to be talking about Britain, the Union Jack, the St George's Cross being raised on buildings, lampposts and streets. But is this a sign of strength or of weakness? We'll be back in a moment. Thank you very much.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, there's plenty of sunshine across Europe and it's feeling hot too, but thunderstorms will be developing, especially midweek. So a bit breezy across parts of Madeira and the Canary Islands with showers here. Best of the sunshine really across much of Spain, but still showers will be bubbling up, especially across parts of Italy later and across Greece. But otherwise, temperatures still up at around 29 to 30 degrees. Now, showers will become more widespread into the week, but otherwise highs of 33.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about life after politics, and the mail Moggs have come steaming in, and I have a special guest in the form of Alfred to read them out.
Elizabeth says, "Very nice to see Lady Coffey. She has more common sense than the whole of His Majesty's government put together." Cole says, "Good evening, lovely Somerset people. You are the citizens of your country and therefore come before others."
Well, thank you for saying lovely Somerset people. That's certainly a view that I believe in. And now we're going to be talking about the English Revolution and what's been going on following a fascinating article in today's Telegraph. So the poet John Aggard once wrote, "What's that fluttering in the breeze? It's just a piece of cloth that brings a nation to its knees." Well, in Britain today, there is a movement unfolding of hundreds of citizens proudly raising the Union Jack and St George's flag, adorning buildings, lampposts and public spaces in a display of national fervour that we haven't seen. And it's in response, at least in part, to the illegal migration crisis being so far out of control. But what does that tell us about our nation and what we think about our nation? Is waving the flag a sign of strength or a sign of weakness? Well, who better could there be to talk to this about than the historian and author, Professor Robert Toombs. Robert, many thanks for joining me. I'm really interested in this. When I was a minister, I didn't think I needed to have two Union Jacks sprouting out of my ears whenever I was on television, because it seemed to me that if a minister of the Crown couldn't be assumed to be patriotic, who could? But now you can't have a picture of a government spokesman without two or more Union Jacks seeming to grow from their head.
Yes, I've always found that rather embarrassing. And I suppose it's because it's assumed that international television audiences won't know who you are, even you, Sir Jacob. But I think it would be nice if we thought that our governments were sufficiently recognisable not to have this symbol. Because I don't think that waving the flag is normally what we think of as part of our national culture.
No, I rather liked it when I was a schoolboy looking through Whitaker's Almanac, and it would list the days on which flags had to be flown, and they were quite obscure, actually. They were some religious circumstances, they were the birthdays of sometimes not very prominent members of the royal family, and if you saw a flag flying, you knew that something was up. And now every government building has them flying all the time. Does it lose its impact when it's flown the whole time?
It certainly does if it's flown all the time by government ministers, I think. But what we're seeing now, of course, is something rather different, indeed entirely different. Usually flying the flag is a sign that you're supporting the establishment, but now flying it, as we're seeing people all over the country do, is a sign that you're very annoyed with the establishment. And that, I think, is something that is really quite striking and to me very surprising. Not that people are annoyed, but they should pretty spontaneously have done this all across the country. And I think it is quite a momentous event.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, because it's showing that the country at large, the voters, feel that their government isn't patriotic. And I think they probably felt that about previous governments too, that they feel that we're not actually on their side. We're not on the side of the British people. We're on the side of the Human Rights Convention and we're on the side of the Refugee Convention, but we're not on the side of the good people of West Harptree.
Well, I think that's precisely what people do think. And for some years, as you say, governments have given precisely that impression. We've talked a lot about the rules-based order, but I think many people feel that the rules are being applied to us, but not obeyed by others. And it's a wonderful thing to obey to obey the referee, but not if the other side's playing by different rules. And I think that to show the flag is a sign that people in the street are saying that we are the country, and we are the people who have the right to fly these, as you say, these pieces of cloth. And I thought it was interesting that both the flag of the Cross of St. George and the Union flag are being flown together, because it seems to me that the Cross of St. George represents something rather deep and emotional about England and its culture, its cultural traditions, whereas the Union Jack, the Union flag, is a symbol of the state and of the authority of the state. And perhaps it is, or it seems to me quite likely, that people feel that both of these things are being outraged, that their cultural traditions are being despised, and that the sovereignty of the state is being flouted.
And there's something quite exciting about seeing the St. George's flag around because of its long history, right back to Edward III, and that feeling of Englishness that is so ancient, but has been sort of rather poo-pooed, at least by the establishment in recent decades.
Yes. I think one can understand why people for a very long time have been worried about the possibility that the English people will stir. Because really the acquiescence of the English in, if I might give myself a plug, I'm writing a book about the Union. And of course the English have for a very long time been the predominant force within the Union, and have also been the paymasters of the Union, as we know, from the very beginning, in fact. And so it's been really necessary for the English people to accept that this is their position, one in which they will not be too assertive, in which they will not demand to govern the whole Union, and that they will be willing to put their hands into their pockets to subsidise poorer parts of the country and the Union. And so I think it is worrying for the establishment. Perhaps to some extent it should be worrying for all of us if Englishness is being radicalised in a way that could shake the foundations of the Union, of which I'm a great supporter, as I think you are, Sir Jacob. And so I think we have to be, our governments have to be very careful in how they handle the English. And it's for a long time there's been a sense that they have to be, in some senses, suppressed, that England might even be broken up into small parts.
Which would be a dreadful thing. I'm glad you gave a plug for your book, because your book on the English is brilliant. There's a flag of St. George even in West Harptree painted on the roundabout here. It really is going across the country. But now that's all from me, and it's over to Patrick Christie's. Patrick, back in the great bustling metropolis.
Well, quite. Absolutely fantastic show, Jacob. Loads on this evening. The latest crime stats from Notting Hill Carnival have just landed, and there's been more than 400 arrests. I'll take you through all of that. Also, the asylum seeker sex offences keep on coming. Sex offences by foreign nationals in entirety, actually, is 62% up. And also, I'm going to be interviewing the people who were petrol bombed whilst they were raising the flags in Stevenage. All after your weather.
Expect warm spells,